For Morningstar, I'm Jeremy Glazer. Here to put some context around reading Friday's jobs numbers is Bob Johnson, our Director of Economic Analysis. Bob, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here today.
So ahead of tomorrow's report, we wanted to look at a few things to keep in mind when you see that headline number. The first, you think, is really to keep this in perspective over the entire year, that we have already seen some pretty dramatic slowdown in job growth.
Absolutely. I think as we look at the ADP numbers, if we look at them over 12 months, they've shown we've had a slowing from about 209,000 jobs on average added per month, dropping all the way down to 174,000 per month. There's been a relatively dramatic slowdown in the amount of hiring going on, and we've seen some slowing in GDP. And there's some controversy whether that's related to the lack of employment or the lack of employees or the lack of jobs. But in any case, the number is quite a bit lower this year, and that's certainly something to keep in mind. I mean, we added about 400,000 less jobs in 2016 than we did in 2015. So clearly not necessarily a robust job market.
And when looking at December 2015, that was a very good month for jobs.
Absolutely. When we look at the numbers, and the consensus is about 185,000 for December, which sounds pretty good compared to a couple of other months we've seen this year. But on the other hand, keep in mind that last year we were at about 260,000 jobs added in the month of December. So it was a really great month last year, and as was November. And so clearly we're a little bit weaker here at the tail end of the year.
December also has a lot of seasonal factors, seasonal adjustments that could impact that number. If it is kind of an exceptionally big number, an exceptionally low number, what sectors do you think would be most responsible for that?
Yeah, and it could always go either way. It could be high, it could be low. It always tends to surprise us. But certainly construction is one, where you've got some seasonal factors built into the number, where December is usually considered to be a pretty low number. But remember, December a year ago was very warm, and so it had some benefit from that. This year is kind of a more normal period. And also keep in mind when you look sequentially, which is how we look at jobs, that November was warm, so construction looked pretty good. And now in December, it won't look as good because the weather was worse. So certainly some impact there. And the other big one is retail. And the issue with retail is, when do the people get hired to do the jobs? And certainly we've had some shift as brick and mortar tends to hire earlier and earlier each year to try to beat out the Amazons of the world. On the other hand, Amazon hires more and more couriers right at the very end of the year. So that could cause some strange things to happen in the number as well. So if you see a strange thing in trade, transportation, and warehousing, or in construction, you can probably ignore the numbers.
On the retail side, though, we are seeing some different signals from ADP and from the official government reports. ADP has been much more bullish on retail. Which do you think reflects reality?
Well, I think given all that we've heard that maybe the holiday season, especially for the brick and mortar guys, not so much the online, but the brick and mortar people, was not so great. And yet ADP said in their report this week that there were about 82,000 jobs added in retail, just a huge number to add in a single month in the trade, transportation, and retail categories. So it's a big surprise, even though their number at 153,000 overall was a little disappointing on the ADP report. I certainly, and half of that was retail. So clearly, their report was even more worrisome than the headline might have suggested, because I really don't think the retail number is going to stand up.
That's likely a sector to keep an eye on. What other parts of the economy or what other sectors will you be looking at closely on Friday morning?
Yep. I mean, the professional business services is huge. It's been usually one of the biggest job-adding categories. Again, ADP saw a big drop-off in December in that number. I don't think the drop-off is going to be that bad, but I would take a look at that number as well, because that's been kind of a key number. And also, leisure and hospitality will be interesting. There's a lot of minimum wage laws that are in the process of kicking in, and if people kind of anticipate that, and have we seen anything happen there? ADP saw some drop-off in those jobs in December. Will we see that in the government report? I don't know.
Speaking of wages, what are your expectations on that front?
I think it's going to be if the broad outlines are right in the ADP report, which I think some of them are, which is namely construction will be probably weaker, and retail probably not as strong as they say, but just maybe you get a little bit of a seasonal bump there. Those aren't particularly good paying jobs, and construction are very good paying jobs, and you average the two together, the wage number might be impacted and might not look very good on a headline basis, just because of that shift more than anything else, not because that any given person is having a great wage increase. It was just a mix shift that's probably driving. And the same will probably go on the hours situation as well.
ADP also gives us a read on what kinds of businesses, small, medium, or large, are adding jobs. What did that look like in December?
Yeah, I think one piece of good news there is that most of the growth was in the large corporate sector. And the reason I say that's good news, not such great news for small business owners, but it's generally more indicative. It's more a leading indicator than small businesses. The big businesses tend to be a little bit ahead of the trend. So I liked that number was a little bit bigger on the large corporations. It was one of the few positive things that we saw out of the whole ADP report, which was really quite negative.
So all in, 185,000 is the expectations of the consensus expectations. Where do you think the number will come in?
I think the number will come in at about 145,000 on private sector, and maybe another 10,000 on the government. Although they're even there, you have to worry about the seasonal on the teachers a little bit. But certainly, I would think 145 private, 155 total is where I'm at, and I think the risk is probably to the downside on that, unless we get a huge pop in retail.
Well, Bob, thank you for the preview and the context today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow after those numbers are out.
Fantastic.
For Morningstar, I'm Jeremy Glazer. Thanks for watching.